go. Good afternoon. I would like to call to order this pandemic version of the regular board meeting of the North County Transit District for June 18th, 2020. I will ask Anthony Flores, the clerk of the board, to call roll.
Thank you, sir. Jack Feller.
Here.
Tony Krantz.
Here.
John Franklin.
Here.
Paul McNamara. I guess he's connected.
Sorry, I'm here. Sorry, a little slow on the unmute.
Jim Desmond.
Here.
Terry Gasserman.
Here.
Jewel Edson.
Here.
Sharon Jenkins.
Here.
Priya Patel.
Here.
Okay, thank you. If you would now rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now Anthony will provide a safety briefing and review evacuation procedures.
Yes, sir. In the event of emergency, I will dial 911. In the event of an evacuation, please do so using the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once clear to the building, please do not re-enter unless told to do so by emergency personnel. We have fire extinguishers on each floor of this building. We also have a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief, sir.
Excellent, thank you. And are there any changes to the posted agenda?
No, sir.
All right, do we have any telephonic comments today?
No, sir.
All right, so before we get into the specific items on the agenda, I would like to outline the pandemic meeting protocols to make the meeting as efficient as possible. First, please hold your comments and or questions until after the agenda item has been presented. Second, when the time comes for board member comments or questions, I will call on each individual board member to see if they have anything for the specific agenda item. Finally, if there are any follow-up comments or questions, please state who is making the request and I will call upon you to make your comment or ask your question. Okay, there are, first, we are to consider the minutes for the regular board meeting of May 21st, 2020 and consent items 1 through 8.
Move approval. Second.
All right, I have a motion for approval from Vice Chair Feller and a second from Board Member Jenkins.
I have a question on item 2.
All right, I think that is Supervisor Desmond. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And this might be tied with item 11, which is the budget, because I see the forecast of ridership. But I guess it was kind of astonishing to me that the report shows, severe reductions in the April ridership, which is no surprise to us. I mean, for the coaster was down 96% in April, and then I guess 72% overall for the entire ridership system across Breeze and Lyft and Flex and the Sprinter. What kind of a timeline, I guess, I see there's a certain ones in item 11 about, proposed ridership. It seemed very ambitious or wishful thinking. I guess how long do we think, I don't know, is best guess or estimate of when we think ridership numbers will come back up to where they were? Is it a year from now, 2 years from now, 6 months from now? I don't know, Matt, where's your crystal ball?
I'm pulling it out of my pocket right now. So from a point of view, we assumed at the end of fiscal year 21, so that would be June 30th of next year, that we would be roughly back at 90% of the ridership level as compared to fiscal year 2019 at that time.
So a year from now, you're going to be back at 90%, you're estimating?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good luck. All right.
I sense some skepticism there.
Well, I'm wishing you luck. I'm hoping that you make it, but I think that's going to be uphill. But okay, thanks. I'm just curious what the estimates were based on. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, ready to vote?
Okay, on the combined motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on May 21st, 2020, and consent items 1 through 8. We'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those,
Aye.
those opposed? I'm sorry, those opposed?
Is that a dog barking?
Those abstain. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the other business items, 9 through 11. There are 3, and Damon Blythe, the Chief Operations Officer, Transit Planning and Bus Operations, is going to review item 9, which will support a significant step towards achieving a state of good repair for the bus fleet and paves the way for subsequent procurements of battery-powered and hydrogen-fueled vehicles.
Good afternoon. So just in the way of background on this procurement, as of April 1st of this year, we had 76 buses that had exceeded their minimum service life as established by the FTA. That's 12 years old or 500,000 miles. On April, the board authorized the purchase of 20 compressed natural gas buses from our existing agreement with New Flyer. Those buses were already programmed into the FY21 CIP. And the approved CIP for 22 and 23 also included funding for 20 buses for each year. We're in the last year of this agreement with New Flyer. It was a 5-year agreement for 103 buses. We have 37 buses left on that contract with New Flyer after those 20. Instead of purchasing the 42 and 23, we would like to get approval to purchase all 37 buses now. This request is for 37 buses, which would take us down to 19. Next month, we'll be coming to the board to request authorization to buy our first 6 zero emissions buses. Those will be battery electric. That'll bring us down to 13 buses remaining past their useful life. And then July of 2021 or thereabouts, we're going to come back to the board and ask for authorization to purchase 8 hydrogen fuel cell buses. And that'll bring us down to 5 buses remaining in the fleet. And we actually estimate that those buses will be retired in October of 2021 due to some efficiencies we're planning as part of the strategic multimodal transportation implementation plan. So by July 2021, we'll have either the buses on hand or the buses on order to maintain a state of good repair. So here's a picture of our current buses that need replacement. This is one of the oldest buses in the fleet, 2300 series. This bus is 15 years old at this point. Here's a picture of the new buses we're buying. We do already have several of these out on the road. This one's a 2700 series. Those were purchased in 2017. So the 37 buses were included in the constrained 5-year capital improvement plan. Like I said, those were 20 buses in 22 and 20 and 23. We're accelerating the procurement of these by reprogramming existing grants. Then those will be backfilled with CARES Act funding. The use of the CARES Act funding frees up that future grant funding that we can reprogram to support preventative maintenance or capital needs. And this also mitigates the potential risk of that money being taken back by the FTA. So like I said, those buses will be funded with FTA and matching TDA funds. The first 20 buses are funded through those specific grants right there for about $11 million. And then we'll be reprogramming future funds for the other 17 buses when we order them. So our recommendation today is to authorize the exercise of the options to New Flyer for those 37 buses, approve a amendment to the FTA grant to reprogram $8,886,000 from preventative maintenance expenses, and approve an amendment to the TDA claim to reprogram $2.2 million from operating to capital as the local match for those FTA funds.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Any questions here
in the House.
in the House? Vice Chair Feller.
Thank you. So by 2021, you won't need to purchase another bus until when?
Right now, we're estimating our next bus purchase would be, the buses would need to arrive in 2024, so we would be purchasing in 2023. And we'll start procurement at that point, but those will be ZEB buses that we're buying at that point is what we're estimating right now.
Okay.
These could potentially be the last CNG buses that we buy, and I'll use that word potentially.
Okay.
Thank you.
Desmond's got a question.
Okay, in a minute.
Of course.
Let's get Board Member Jenkins.
Question, you said the useful service life was 12 years old, or how many?
500,000 miles.
500,000, thanks.
Board Member Desmond.
Thank you. Say, if you go back to your previous slide, the second bullet there. So you're asking to take money from this FTA grant to reprogram $8.8 million from preventative maintenance expenses. So what preventative? I'm a big fan of preventative maintenance. So where is this preventative? Where is this coming from? This preventative maintenance from what? Is it from the existing buses, or where is this coming from?
So Yoon is going to come up, Jim, and what I want to do is back up one additional slide. Damon was going pretty efficiently through it, and it had been my intent that Yoon walk through this a little bit. Yoon, walk through that slide a little bit again.
So preventive maintenance expenses are district-wide expenses. They're not specifically earmarked for buses. They can be used for any expenses that are either for bus or rail or even facilities or other equipment to continue maintaining state of good repair. These funds are not used as part of the capital program and the budgeting process. We program certain amounts from each grant that's going to be used for preventive maintenance expenses. So these are amounts that have been allocated and apportioned, but we have not spent yet.
And so, Jim, to build on that, is if you go back, Anthony, one slide to there's a grants management strategy. So the 37 buses are included in the constrained 5-year program. So we were going to be purchasing these buses over the next couple of fiscal years. So what we're doing is merely accelerating the purchases of these additional buses. We're going to do, I'll use the fund swap with color of money. And reprogram those existing dollars that are currently programmed as preventative maintenance and to a capital to support the purchase of the buses. And then we're going to use the CARES Act dollars to fund those dollars. The significant importance of it is that it frees up those dollars that we were going to use for the buses in the future. So in the future years, if we need that money for preventative maintenance, we will be able to program those dollars to preventative maintenance. This helps us in our strategy of managing how we use our CARES Act dollars and making sure that we don't have a significant balance of CARES Act dollars. It should also save us some money because we should avoid some escalation costs associated with buses if we buy buses 2 years from now versus buying buses now. So that's what the transaction is a really good question that you asked.
Well, thank you, Matt. But okay, so are we going to be, so we're using the CARE Act dollars now while we can, which is good. So are we going to have, and you're saying that we're going to have other monies for preventative maintenance in the future because we're using the CARES Act dollars now? I'm just trying to make sure we're not giving up all of our preventative maintenance.
No. Yes, every year, Jim, we get a portion about, in a typical year, we get about $38 million from the federal government. We go through a process. And before we get to an allocation of dollars or federal dollars for capital projects, we first go through and satisfy what do we need to support our operating costs. That's where the federal dollars get to be used for preventative maintenance. So this is not a one-time use or a one-time activity. It's in every grant. And all we're doing now is taking a tranche of preventative maintenance from either FY20 or prior years that we haven't used, reprogramming it to fund something that we can purchase right now. It poses no risk to us in the future. And in fact, it gives us greater capacity in the future because we would have already taken care of an activity today, which will free up those dollars for us for future activities.
Okay. All right. Well, then on the last slide, whatever the one I started off on, that one, on bullet 3, it says you're taking 2.2 million from operating dollars to capital dollars as a local match to the FTA. So are we going to be short operating dollars? And if so, I mean, where is that coming from in operating dollars?
So those are TDA dollars. And the way it works is that the federal program provides 80 to 83% on a bus, and we provide local match to those dollars. The TDA dollars can be programmed as either operating or capital. If you take a look in the upcoming item for our budget, our upcoming 5-year budget still shows balance. So again, these are part of the activities that we're doing to advance projects strategically where it provides benefit to the district. So absolutely no worry about this creating an issue for us in the future.
Well, I know operating dollars are always kind of more elusive, I guess, than capital dollars in transit operations. I just want to make sure that we're not cutting ourselves short of operating dollars, or we're at least being made whole. However, backfilling these with other dollars or something like that for the operations portion.
And absolutely, Jim. And I would tell you, you would be shocked at how much time we spend around here having the very conversation around the issue you just said. We are totally 1000% mindful of it. And so we are confident in the strategy that we're advancing.
Okay. All right, Matt. Thank you.
Okay, Board Member McNamara, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Board Member Franklin?
No, none here.
Board Member Gasterlin?
Hi, yes. I may have missed it, but to what extent are these buses, the new buses, cleaner in terms of mileage per gallon or whatever, and in terms of the greenhouse gas savings?
So these buses are identical to the last round of buses that we purchased in April and December of last year. They do have a low NOx engine in them, which is required by the state of California. They are already CNG buses, so they're cleaner burning than your average diesel bus. Of course, nothing's going to match the zero emissions bus in terms of tailpipe emissions because these are still internal combustion engines, but they do meet all the state requirements for, emissions.
Great. So I would like to see you highlighting this in terms of trying to attract riders, trying to help people feel like, hey, these are new buses, not just these, but the ones bought in April and December. This is a real opportunity to kind of show a new face to NCTD. And related to that, is there a plan for these buses to be distributed across all the different lines so that these and the recent purchases have visibility throughout the system?
Correct. Yeah, these will be spread out between our two operating divisions in the east and the west, roughly 60-40. 60% to the west and 40% to the east, because that's sort of the size of those two facilities.
Great, thank you.
And a follow-up to that question, there is a statutory requirement to be zero emissions by what year?
2040 is the goal. It's not a requirement.
Okay.
The requirement is that you're not allowed to buy any internal combustion buses after 2028.
Okay.
Provided a whole bunch of other criteria are met.
And your presentation makes reference to the zero emissions buses that we're going to begin procuring, and that's with an eye towards eventually replacing all these new buses at the end of their useful life with zero emissions buses.
Correct.
And to be specific, beyond this electric pilot that we're going to implement, we're waiting to hear on a grant application related to hydrogen buses. And if we are funded for that, that's going to allow us to advance a project that will create the capacity, I think, for fueling of 50 hydrogen buses. We likely will make a much more significant investment in procurement of hydrogen buses, because hydrogen buses will meet our operating requirements, and we will have the physical plant that would be able to support that in the future. So that's likely the direction we would go, assuming funding is made available to offset the differential between the CNG bus and the hydrogen bus.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Bhat Patel, do you have any questions?
No, thank you so much.
Board Member Edson, any questions?
My colleagues have done a good job of asking all the questions I might have had. Thank you.
All right, then I would, do we have any telephonic comments on this?
Sir.
Okay, then, can I get a motion to approve agenda item 9?
So moved.
Second.
On a motion by board member Vice Chair Feller and board member Jenkins.
On the motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve agenda item number 9. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Those that abstain? Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Okay, excellent. Moving on, next item, Yoon Park Lynch. The CFO will review item number 10, which will support the procurement of 2 new train sets that will allow NCTD to increase coaster frequencies from 22 trains per average weekday to 42 trains. Staff has been working proactively to advance the procurements for locomotives and rail cars. The approval of this agenda item and approval by the California Transportation Commission for Local Partnership Program funds will allow NCTD to execute an agreement to advance construction of rail cars to support expanded service in 2023. Yoon?
Good afternoon, board members. I'm here to present to request the approval of the MOA with SANDAC to be able to finance the 2 new train sets that will support increased coastal service. Back in September 2019, the SANDAC board directors approved the allocation of $58.8 million for the purchase of 2 additional train sets. With these new train sets, we'll be able to increase our daily train capacity from 22 daily trains to 42 daily trains. That represents a 91% increase. Funding from SANDAC will come over the course of 4 years from FY21 through FY24, with most of the funding being programmed for FY23 and FY24. We currently have an existing contract with Siemens that includes the option to purchase additional locomotives. The district is also participating in a multi-agency procurement for replacement and expansion of rail, coach, and cab cars. In order to be able to make these advance payments to our contractors, we will require short-term funding through the SANDAC TransNet debt financing program. The TransNet debt financing program is a program that has been established by SANDAC in order to advance projects that are eligible under the TransNet extension ordinance in order to accelerate the implementation of these projects. The agencies that receive this funding are also liable and responsible for a proportional share of the issuing costs, as well as the ongoing interest and related administrative costs. Repayments of the principal amount is made as funding is received. The district will be getting the funding for principal payments through grant allocation from the local partnership program and additional funding that is programmed through TransNet. Interest is also paid on a monthly basis, and they are deducted from the district TransNet revenues. The district is requesting that the board adopt resolution number 2007, authorizing the executive director to negotiate and execute a memorandum of agreement with SANDAC for debt financing through the TransNet program. We are requesting the debt financing to be to the amount of up to $46 million. The difference between the $46 million and the $58.8 million, which is the total project cost, is because we have taken into account the timing of reimbursements from different funding sources. SANDAC is planning to request approval from its board at its July 2020 meeting to execute the MOA with NCTD. The memorandum of agreement, an estimated repayment schedule, has been attached to the staff report as attachment 10B. Staff recommendation: staff recommends that the board adopt resolution number 2007, authorizing the executive director to negotiate and execute a memorandum of agreement with SANDAC in an amount not to exceed of $46 million for short-term financing to acquire 2 additional train sets to provide more frequent coastal commuter rail service along the coastal corridor. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Okay. Questions? Board Member Jenkins.
So back when you were talking about TransNet revenues, how does the possibility of TransNet revenues not being what we expect them to be affect this?
So far, there has not been any indication from SANDAC that there's going to be any reduction on TransNet revenues for this program. So, and then those TransNet revenues are going to receive over the course of several years, with the majority of it coming FY23 and FY24. So hopefully by then we'll have more gradual recovery of the economy, and we will not see as much as an impact as we would if the money had been programmed earlier.
Okay, thank you.
And let me build on this because I know you knows this. So this was, the money was approved by the SANDAG board as part of the adoption of their 5-year capital improvement program. That happened last summer. There is different flavors of money that are included in this program or projects. So one piece of the funding is about $21 million of state local program program partnership,
Local partnership program.
Partnership program dollars. And that is slated for CTC approval, I think, is it this month?
June 26th.
June 26th. So that's not impacted by TransNet revenues. Another part of this money was associated with CMAQ dollars. That's Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Improvement Fund dollars. And I think that was in the neighborhood of 20-something odd million dollars. That is not impacted by TransNet dollars. Then there was tranches of TransNet revenue that was available earlier on in the project. So this is not a heavily dependent and leveraged TransNet program. There was a ton of activity behind the scenes that we were doing to swap dollars because we needed to get federal dollars out of the program because we're not using, we're purchasing off of state funded contracts.
Okay, any questions from folks on the phone? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second, this is Jewel.
Jewel seconds. Okay,
All right. On the motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Joel Edson to approve agenda item number 10, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Those that abstain? Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
okay. Thank you. Moving on to item number 11. The board has received a number of presentations to support the adoption of the budget. The presentations have included the strategic framework and goals, assessing the risk range of COVID-19, cost containment strategies, and last month, a detailed presentation of the proposed budget. The Executive Director and Yoon Park Lynch, the CFO, will review item 11. As a reminder, we are opening the public hearing for this item and will acknowledge public comments after Ms. Park Lynch's presentation. Mr. Tucker, I will turn it over to you to kick it off.
All right, so I will say in advance, we have a shorter presentation than the presentation we gave last month. I just wanted to set the table a little bit for Yoon. We have worked very closely with the board over the course of the last, I think, 6 months or so to develop the capital, the operating and capital budget. I want to just make a couple of different comments. One comment is, I feel pretty confident in terms of what we've done with this budget. We have gone through an exhaustive exercise looking at the different ranges of risks, and I feel confident that we are more than budgeted. And in fact, you will see in the 5-year budget, we show balance throughout. One of the things that I do want to address is one of the comments, one of the questions that Board Member Desmond was making in terms of ridership. We did make an assumption that ridership would return substantially by the end of this fiscal year 21, again, June 30th of 2021. But we are more than financially efficient and have more than enough funds to be able to navigate if the revenues remain down from a customer revenue point of view, 75% as an example. One of the things I think that we're all going to have to assume is that we're going to have to make certain levels of projections of when ridership and revenue is going to return. there are certain fundamental premises of the economy that if they prove to be different, then as I would say, transit is going to be like the least of everyone's worries. And so we've looked at this and developed the budget within the next over a 5-year period with sufficient flexibility. And I wanted you guys to also know that we have made sure that we do have provisions within our budget and planning process should revenues deteriorate further beyond what we could have reasonably assumed. So we already do have in place contingencies for service reductions that was presented in the presentation last month. We already have contingencies and have identified what phase reductions in personnel would be. And of course, we've already taken some actions to contain costs to the degree that we can. What we focused on is the fact that we try to manage these budgets for a 5 to 10 year period. And so over the course of this 5 to 10 year period, we do contemplate service improvements, but the service improvements substantially do not begin until 2023. And the planned service improvements that we have scheduled for April is an incremental, but we obviously have already acknowledged if we are significantly still experiencing the impacts of COVID-19, we would not implement that. So I feel really confident about where we are in terms of this budget process. We've thought through these different activities. And I think when you stress test it in all of the different directions that we have, I feel confident about it. The one area of risk that we don't know is federal funding. And what is federal funding going to be, or state funding? What is that going to be over the next 3 to 5 years? It's a known that transportation funding has a lot of challenges. The use of gas tax as the primary funding entity from a federal point of view has been steadily eroding and requiring the federal government to have to put general fund dollars to balance those budgets. Over the last couple of years, we've seen significant influx of revenue from the federal government, that really have helped advance us forward. But no one knows what the future is going to hold if federal and state and local governments become extremely conservative based upon downturns in the economy and revenue. We can't obviously plan for that. We have to assume the assumptions that are based upon the best information that we have available today and what is currently in the Transportation Authorization Bill. So within that context, I just wanted to make sure I did caveat that we don't know all of the answers. All we can do is to make the assumptions based upon the information that we have, combined with the $95 million in CARES Act. I feel pretty good about where we are at.
So, quick question. You're making these assumptions, but you also mentioned that you have contingency plans in the event the assumptions are.
Absolutely. So, just as a reminder, you're going to see it in Yoon's presentation. So right now, the fiscal year 21 budget assumes that we're going to use $20.7 million of CARES Act dollars. We were allocated $95 million of CARES Act dollars. From the fiscal year 20, so the current fiscal year that we're in, I think through March, we did not need to use CARES Act dollars. We were still running super duper efficient based upon the board's approval in the last fiscal year budget that we were going to continue this path towards advancing our future plans to grow, but we were also planning for an economic downturn, not COVID-19, but an economic downturn. So as of December of last year, we were already in a net surplus position of about $3.5 million or so. So those are the activities we continually have done. And so if you start looking at the range of risk for us, customer revenue is about $16 million. So if we miss customer revenue by a significant amount based upon the assumption that I shared that's included in the budget, we're talking about maybe $5 million. But we have $95 million. We programmed $20.7 million in this budget. We have yet to use the dollars. We will use some of it for the remainder of the fiscal year. So I very much doubt we're going to find ourselves in trouble, particularly in fiscal year 21.
Ms. Lynch.
So the budget process is a multi-step process, and it really started back in December 2019 when the board approved our capital improvement program for the next 5 years. And the capital improvement program has been already programmed in the SANDAG 2018 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. On March 5th, the executive director made a presentation to the executive team about the proposed budget goals and expressed its support to make sure that we maintain course on the goals that we had set up in the prior year. On April 16, the board set a public hearing date for June 18 for consideration of the budget, and that's where we are here today. We also presented detailed information related to the financial impact of COVID-19 back in April, and last month on May 6, the clerk of the board published notice of the public hearing, including the date that the documents will be available for public review and comment. On May 21st, NCT staff provided a detailed presentation of our budget and the significant assumptions for revenue and expenses. On June 3rd, we posted our budget document on our website. It has also been available at our transit centers in Oceanside, Escondido, and Vista. So until today, we have not received any public comment on our proposed budget. So this slide, I'm not going to go through the details, but these are the additional documents that are part of the proposed budget. They were also presented last month in May. So today we're here asking the board to adopt the budget for fiscal year 2021. There have been no changes from the presentation that we made back in May. There have been no changes in assumptions for either for revenue or expenses. We maintain our employee headcount at 145.5 full-time equivalents. We continue to project ridership to about 8.6 million riders in FY21. Total expenses are at $127.4 million. Expenses related to positive train control will be funded through our capital projects. Therefore, it will not impact our operating budget. And we intend to utilize approximately $20.7 million from CARES Act funding to supplement any losses that we get from passenger fares, TDA, and TransNet revenues. Just a caveat, our pension and funded accrued liability and the debt repayment for Sprinter debt is not included in our operating budget. The following slide is a detailed summary of our budgeted revenue expenses on how they compare to prior years and prior year's budget. As you can see, NCT is adopting a balanced budget for FY 2021. This is a 5-year plan. This summarizes the projections of revenues over the course of the next 5 years. It includes passenger fares, funding that we expect to receive from federal grant, state, and local. The projection for state and local funding has been provided from SANDAG. These are TDA and TransNet funds. And then for funds allocation, it also illustrates of how we intend to allocate those dollars between a capital program, preventive maintenance expenses, positive train control, and operating expenses. As you can see, NCTD plans to have balanced budget for the next 5 years. And in this graphic is to summarize the capital improvement program that was approved by our board back in December 2019. As you can see, the vast majority of our capital program is earmarked for replacement of rail vehicles and bus vehicles for rolling stock. And with that said, we are requesting board action today to close the public hearing on the proposed FY 2021 operating budget and FY 21-25 capital improvement program, to adopt the proposed FY 21 operating budget and FY 21-25 capital improvement program, to approve the proposed FY 21 employee classification and compensation schedule, to approve the proposed FY 21 cost recovery fee schedule, to approve the proposed disadvantaged business enterprise goal, and finally to approve the proposed FY 21 FY 30 service implementation plan. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Anthony, are there any public comments?
No, sir.
All right, board member questions or comments? Board member Jenkins.
Is there a deadline that we have to use the CARES Act money by?
That is the conundrum, because the way that funding was established, it is open-ended that it could be rescinded, the authority, at any time. And that's why we have to be extremely strategic. All of the guidance that's been given by our trade association and from the Federal Transit Administration is to spend and spend quickly. Different agencies are having different strategies depending upon where they sit financially. Some of the bigger systems in the country, like New York and Washington, D.C., they essentially exhausted their CARES Act dollars within the first 6 months. If you look, for example, at MTS budget, they assume that they will use CARES Act dollars for both fiscal year 20 and 21, and that would exhaust their dollars. Based upon our current assumption is that we could spread it out over the 5 years and likely still have money left depending on what happens. And so over time, what you're going to see from us is as we move closer down the calendar year and see how things start happening, we will be coming back with subsequent actions to mitigate the risk of a future rescission. And that's where you start looking at strategically those items that you're going to do no matter what. So we're going to purchase buses. And so if we purchase those buses, that we're going to use those $5307 that could either be preventative maintenance or for capital purchase. If you advance that project today, you're freeing those dollars up in the future with those. So stay tuned that after we come back from the August break, that during those months, as we are kind of monitoring what is happening from a COVID-19 point of view, we likely will be recommending additional activities by the board to mitigate the risk.
And how much did you say we were using this current year?
We were, the current budget assumes $20.7 million.
For this upcoming budget. What about this current year?
And so I don't know if we have a forecast because we hadn't used it through the end of March.
Okay. So we're not sure if we're going to need to use any.
Right, because remember there's there's revenues and expenses, and we have been doing a really phenomenal job in terms of managing the expenses.
So of the $95 million at this point, the first we'll be using in the upcoming year, and it'll be about 21 million. So whatever that is, 70 some left that is kind of dangling.
And we'll be using $9 million for the CNG bus purchase as well, because we're going to be backfilling our preventive maintenance and TDA with the CARES Act. So that's another $11 million for that procurement. Yeah, it's like 10, 11. Yeah.
And will we be getting, obviously you're going to be watching this very closely. Will we be getting, the board be getting regular updates? So we're not just looking at it once a year or twice a year, because there's a lot of moving parts that could change.
Absolutely. So, we produce a quarterly report, and we will make sure those are placed on the agenda for discussion. Okay. Because, really, all of us are going to kind of go through this together to see how the economy reopens.
And then, like Mac mentioned, we had a surplus of about $6 million through December, and we'll be coming next month with our quarterly report for March, and we'll still have a surplus for March.
Thank you.
Okay, any participants on the phone have any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing and approve those 6 recommendations as part of agenda item number 11.
So moved.
Second. Either one.
On the motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to close the public hearing and approve agenda item 11. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Those that abstain? Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I would like to thank staff for the great work that was done in preparation of this budget, as well as board members. We had a lot of questions and comments throughout the process, so thank you all very much. Moving on to informational items, number 12 is our Chief of Safety, Sean Lufborough, is going to present item number 12 on the COVID-19 effects on transit operations.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and those visiting on the phone. We'll go through some updated guidance that we have, operational changes and protocols that are in place, a reminder about our public and employee communications, and then some of the planning efforts that we're doing for longer term. This slide is already incorrect. So the public health order for the county was updated effective June 16th was the most recent one, which was released Tuesday. No significant changes from previous versions for transit. There's nothing that changed as far as our procedures or protocols, but that date, obviously when we turned this in, was prior to that. The county also announced 13 different metrics that they're using or triggers for modifying the health order's health officer's order. Those includes community outbreaks, ICU capacity, additional criteria based on cases, testing, et cetera. So those are being monitored, and that can swing either way. So that can either help us with easing of restrictions, or if things start to trend negatively, it could impose future restrictions depending on what the health officer decides to do for the county. As far as operationally, ridership down is approximately 64%, but we are starting to see growth with almost 12,500 weekday trips on average. So it's a slow, steady climb, but that's progress in the right direction, so that's good to see. We are still continuing on the bus side with our rear door boarding, and again, no reduction in hours for direct or contract employees. But we do have face masks that we're distributing on both the bus and the rail vehicles, both Coaster and Sprinter, for customers that do not have a mask on them or a face covering, so we were able to provide those. And we're advancing a procurement to install bus operator protection barriers for all those buses that you just approved, as well as retrofitting the fleet that we have here at NCTD. And that will provide a physical barrier between folks that board on the front, so that will allow us at least a step in the right direction to allow boarding back on the front of the bus and offer additional protections for our employees. We're also advancing a procurement for hand sanitizer equipment on all of our vehicles. We already have that on the Coaster, but we want to put that on all of our buses as well as the Sprinter fleet. So that is advancing as well. We do appreciate our customers, and right now they're very compliant for the face covering order in general. So the coach operators have a button if somebody doesn't wear a mask they can track, and then the conductors and train attendants in our rail vehicles are manually tracking folks that are non-compliant or don't have a face covering. And what we've observed over the last month is we're about 99% compliance for Coaster and bus, and about 97% for Sprinter, which is very good, and we do appreciate that from our ridership. We've also procured a thermal camera system that we'll have at all of our facilities. This will be able to do temperature screening for employees. So you essentially, it's a tablet on a pedestal. You'll walk up, put your pretty little face in there, and then it's a audible and visual alarm if you're over the threshold temperature, which in this case, based on the current order, is 100 degrees. So it'll flash red and then sound like a klaxon. So you'll either dive like a submarine, or you'll say, hey, you have a fever. We'll do a secondary screen at that point, and then that employee will be sent home to seek further medical advice as required. We're still continuing to update the public through rider alerts, press releases, et cetera, additional signage. We are updating employees and contractors as guidelines are modified to make sure everybody has the current playbook. And we're starting to evaluate a phased approach to return employees from a remote working status. I know several of the cities have started that discussions, as well as we just had a meeting today with a lot of the California transit agencies. Many of them are at least reviewing and developing that plan. Our plan, we do have a draft plan. It's almost through the final review, and we'll start to bring our employees back that have been in a remote status. We also have updates from the Ridership Recovery Growth Task Force. We did have an initial meeting in June, which include members from this board, as well as NCTD employees and regional transportation partners such as LoSAN, Metrolink, Sandag, MTS, and OCTA. There was a ridership survey that was discussed, looking forward to potential advertising and marketing campaigns to try to bring that ridership back, and again, to try to see what the current thought process is and what we could do, again, to draw the ridership back and even potentially grow to beyond what it was before. As far as the Safety and Operations Recovery Plan, NCTD has been a participant in an APTA. They've had a technical working group specifically for cleaning, and that's revenue vehicles and facilities. We've had an active participant in that. One of my safety division team members was on that technical group. They have a draft standard that's going to be released. Once that's out, that'll give us the guideline or the playbook for us to do a long-term cleaning protocol strategy on what we need to do to continue this in the future for not only our revenue vehicles, but for facilities. We're also working with the vehicle vendors to see if there's reconfiguration plans. So some of them have potentials to one-way flow through the vehicle or block off seats depending on social distancing requirements. So we're evaluating those plans that are coming from our vehicle vendors. And we do have a healthy supply of personal protective equipment, not only for our employees, but for our customers. So we will be able to pass those masks out, have that hand sanitizer, and we'll continue to monitor that. And if we need additional supplies, we will procure those. There was also a memo that was attached that highlighted all the topics that I discussed, and that was in the board packet. But that's all I have for today, pending any questions from you all.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Board Member Jenkins.
I have one. So what happens to those who aren't complying, the 1% on the coaster and the 3% on the Sprinter?
In general, right now, it's very similar to our fare policy. So remind them that the policy is that they should be wearing a face covering, offer them a face covering, and that's essentially what we're doing right now, which is why we have those masks, is we can offer something to the customers. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from board members on the phone?
I have a question. The governor just came out today saying everybody has to wear masks now in the state of California if you're going to be less than 6 feet apart. So do we have enough masks on hand to give them to everybody? I mean, I realize there's about 97% or 95% participation rate already, but just be aware that the governor has now declared we all have to wear them.
Yes, Mr. Desmond. Our initial order was 40,000. We have additional ones coming, so we have additional supply coming. So, and most of the people that we do observe have their own masks, but we do have a ready supply available based on that update. And really, there's no change from what the county in general had already had in place. It was already required for our employees. It was required for our customers. So for this county, it wasn't a significant change, but we do have adequate supplies on hand, and we'll continue to monitor and reorder as required.
Then now I got a follow-up question from Matt, or not a follow-up, but a different question from our executive director. The on the work at home effort, you know, I'm kind of enjoying not having to drive to meetings, and I'm just wondering if, you know, what kind of protocol you're going to have with the employees. Are you going to try to get everybody 100% back to work at the office, or 80%, or have you given any thought to allowing people to not have to drive as much?
So we've strategically started that discussion, and I think the first step that I wanted to take was to let people know that we would start a phased return back to the office. There are going to be certain groups of employees who have different considerations, whether it be their health or health within their family, or in the short term, childcare issues that we're going to exempt. There may be an additional group of employees that we exempt just to support social distancing. But other than that, our intent is to return our employees back. And what's significant is, and this is something we talk about as a culture of our organization, is that we are a customer focused and driven organization, and we actually have to be present and available to work with our customers and to support the needs of the operations that occurs out on the street. I know for a fact, watching a lot of the discussion nationwide about teleworking, and I'm going a little bit further than the question, there's a whole lot of discussions out there about teleworking becoming the permanent way that businesses will work in the future. I used to be in charge of a state agency that one of our major goals in Virginia was telework. Telework has pros and cons, and depending upon what classification or type of work that someone performs, it could be beneficial and still support the needs of the agency. We've done different types of teleworking historically here at the district, and for the short term, it generally works okay. For the long term, significant teleworking, I've always found to create issues related to productivity and disconnect from the operational tempo and the culture. And so as we move forward to this, there's a balancing act that we're going to have to test. But you know, I don't see us significantly taking the perspective that we're going to have large tranches of employees teleworking, because the nature of their duty is going to require them to be here, require them to be able to collaborate with other people to advance projects and customer needs.
Okay, well, and the only reason I ask that is I kind of, being in the transportation transit business and Sandag and everything else, it's often, government's not only job to, request people to do the right things, but also show them we're doing the right things as well, or participating. And I realize certain job descriptions don't allow for telecommuting, but I think it's, we got to sometimes put our money where our mouth is, either ride transit or stay at home, if potentially, or, try not to drive as much if that's an option. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks for looking into that and answering the question.
Yeah, and Jim, I like your idea about insisting on more transit riders. So we should make sure that we spread that message. It's interesting to read about the impacts that this telecommuting has had on the private sector, because there are significant companies that are making the transition to 100% telecommute. It will be interesting to see how that affects the commercial real estate market. So
yeah, that's true. Well, and as the chair of Sandag, I don't know if I'll be chair much after this year, but I'm going to try to have at least maybe every other meeting be a Zoom meeting, so that we don't all have to jump in our cars and drive all the way down to San Diego for meetings. So anyway, so there's some pros and cons and things we've learned throughout this pandemic.
Okay, any other questions from the folks on the phone? Sean, I have one question. The rear door boarding, how have our riders adapted to that? Is that causing any delays, or are we finding that it's
It's not. It's been in place. There's occasional incidents, but for the most part, it's well instituted. We still do allow boarding for people that request the ramp on the front, so it's not 100% exclusive. That's still required. That if somebody requests assistance, they will still drop a ramp and have them board. But for the most part, we've had nothing significant to report from that. It's on the banner on the bus as it pulls in. It says rear door boarding, and then we have a sign posted on the door as well for those new riders if they're not familiar with the process, but nothing significant.
Great. Okay, this is an informational item, so there is no vote required. I'm assuming we have no telephonic comments, Anthony?
No, sir.
Okay, very good. Moving on to the executive director's report. Mr. Tucker, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a couple of items. We have received, I think as the board is aware, we through CBRE released a request for proposals for development at Oceanside Transit Center. We have received 4 proposals. We are looking to come to the board in September with a recommendation related to that. It's extremely exciting times. Can't talk about it at this point, but we're hoping things stay in line so that we can come forward with that recommendation in the month of September.
Excellent. Are you having any trouble with those folks in Oceanside?
Well, as long as we can keep Jack under control. I will tell you, Oceanside has been, we have worked very closely with the city of Oceanside, and it has been really significantly helpful in this process that they partner so closely, and they are part of the evaluation team with NCTD.
Great. Jack says all he needs is more Kit Kat bars.
The second item I do want to mention, I know most of the board members are aware we're about to submit a CRISI grant application related to the downtown convention center platform and railroad passenger and freight railroad improvements. I think Hassan has alluded to this at Sandag several times, that over the last few months, we have been working very closely with Sandag and with the state and with BNSF to develop a program of projects. That program of projects likely will be folded into a grant application for trade quarter enhancement funds. It would be a significant program of projects. And one of the things that we're attempting to do is to bring additional dollars to that program. So I'm hoping probably by August, probably September, July or September, we will come in to the board and make a presentation about that complete program of projects. It's a significant set of projects because it does support more than 5 additional freight trains per day, which is significant for NCTD. More freight trains mean more revenue to NCTD. So if BNSF wants to operate those additional trains, they will have to increase the payments made to NCTD. It also supports our goal to be able to have a 1-seat ride to the Gaslamp Convention Center district area. And it also supports Amtrak's goal and the state funding that has been allocated for those trains to go to a new maintenance facility in National City. So it's a big deal in terms of what the program and projects that we're putting forward. So look forward to bringing that forward to the board in either July or September.
It's a coaster station at the convention center.
Correct. It would be a coaster only station.
Okay, is anything else? That's it. Board member reports, comments, and correspondence. Anything from folks on the phone?
This is Terry, although I think Jewel jumped in just before me.
Go ahead, Terry.
Okay. I wanted to say I'm here in Del Mar, and the renovation of the path that's between 7th Street, well, let's see, so 9th Street to about 6th Street is underway, and it's going really well. We're watching it change each day. The workers who are working on it are kind and courteous, and I have to say the skateboarders are going to love their newly done Del Mar ditch. But it's an awful lot of fun to see it proceeding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Chair. So 2 things. I attended the LoSAN board meeting by Zoom, of course, on Monday, and they provided a ridership update for the week of June 8th to 14th. Daily ridership averaged 963 passengers, which is a decrease of approximately 8% over the same week in the prior year. So it's still down significantly, but the average is an increase of nearly 34% over the prior week. And that's important. So they are seeing, saying things are trending well, as they seem to be with NCTD. So I think it's important that we just keep looking for people to get back to riding the trains again. And I do think that all of the information that we're getting out there with regard to sanitizing and making it safe for people so that they feel comfortable is really important. Also, the Del Mar Bluffs Subworking Group on Long-Term Alignment Objectives is meeting again this coming Tuesday. And I'm sure NCTD will be there as well. Thanks.
Okay, Vice Chair Feller. All right. Anything? Very good. Anthony, do we have any remaining public comments?
No, sir.
Very good. So the next scheduled meeting is the regular board meeting of July 16, 2020 at 2 p.m. And we are adjourned until then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.